Welcome to this Calvet webinar on the topic of missing and murdered Indigenous peoples, raising awareness for veteran service providers. I'm Xochitl Rodriguez Murillo, Deputy Secretary for Minority and Underrepresented Veterans here at the California Department of Veterans Affairs. Today's informational webinar takes place during National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Since 2010, the month of January has been dedicated nationally to raising awareness about the different forms of human trafficking and educating people about this crime and how to prevent it. We will begin today's program with the prayer presented by Roy Tubers de la Rosa.
Nehena hayo hada, Nehena hayo hada, Nehena hayo hada, Nehena hayo hada, yo weda yo slow yo where I started the prayer today, so in the traditional way, with song, to open up the sky so our grandfather, the Great Spirit will hear us. He has many names: Abanili, Ho-Chunk, Wakatanka, Wusong, Wusong. So I'm going to pray today to my Father in the Apache way and ask you to pray your way. Wusong, Wusong, Wusong. We are gathered today, Father, and we ask you to look down upon us, to guide this council, to make it holy, to gather my sisters and brothers with one heart. And for all those who are gathered behind us, for all those who are brought to this council to listen, shield and protect them, Father. Protect those particularly who have suffered and have knowledge of this terrible, terrible problem that is going on in this country. For those who have knowledge and know of the pain and suffering that it had caused them personally in their lives, or know of someone. So I ask you, Father, to protect them and give them guidance, and know that we are here, that this council is gathered around this fire to bring this to light. And we ask you, Father, to give us the words and to open up our hearts that we may listen to your knowledge and to your wisdom. I hope.
Thank you, sir. Roy Tubers de la Rosa is a Marine Corps veteran. He is Uemi, Ende, Yaqui, and Apache. He is a board member of the Native American Veterans Association, member of the Honor Guard, and Navas acting spiritual advisor. Thank you once again, guests, for joining us to discuss this very important and sensitive topic. Today's webinar is a collaborative effort through which we hope to bring awareness, resources, and tools to veteran service providers who serve Native American and Alaskan Indian veterans and their families by bringing awareness to the issues that affect and impact Indigenous communities, specifically the movement and sociological phenomenon of missing and murdered Indigenous peoples. We will have a comprehensive discussion on the resources available to the community to strengthen the efforts of providing a support system to communities impacted by this issue and to better serve and connect Indigenous veteran survivors and their families to resources and benefits. Now, due to the sensitive nature of this topic, we understand there might be some triggered reactions from our audience that require immediate mental health intervention. The Northern California VA Health System joins us today and is ready to assist. Dr. Catherine Novotny, psychologist, Yolanda Hagen, Women Veteran Program Manager, and Chelsea Miller, Deputy Women's Veterans Program Manager, are available to connect with anyone who needs help during and after the event. You may connect with them directly by using the chat feature. We also have phone contact information if you wish to speak with them directly. Now, I'm going to go over the chat feature for today's event. We have a Q&A chat feature at the bottom, which you may use to submit your questions. Today's agenda will feature the NorCal Veteran Women's Program, Calvet Secretary Dr. Vito Imbasiani, the Governor's Tribal Advisor, the Yurok Tribal Court, the Office of Native American Affairs, California Department of Justice, the Bureau of Indian Affairs Office of Justice Services, the VA Office of Tribal Government Relations, and the Native American Veterans Association, followed by a Q&A segment before the conclusion of today's program. All right, and Ricky, next slide. Here to give us an overview of the services available at the Women Veteran Services at the VA Northern California Healthcare System are Dr. Catherine Novotny, Ms. Yolanda Hagan, and Ms. Chelsea Miller. Dr. Novotny is a psychologist by training and currently works as a military sexual trauma recovery coordinator and women's mental health champion for the VA Northern California Healthcare System at the Martinez Outpatient Clinic. She received her doctorate in clinical psychology from Boston University in 2001 and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at the San Francisco VA Medical Center with emphasis in post-traumatic stress and substance use disorders. And that was in 2005 when she was hired to be hired as an OEF, Operation Enduring Freedom, and OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom psychologist. Yolanda Hagan is the Women Veterans Program Manager for the VA Northern California Healthcare System, and she is also an Air Force veteran who enlisted and rose through the ranks to Master Sergeant E7 and later obtained her commission and retired as a major. She is a registered nurse with 16 years experience in women's health. Finally, Chelsea Miller is a licensed clinical social worker and the Deputy Women's Program Manager for the VA Northern California Healthcare System. She has been working in the VA healthcare system since 2016 in primary care, HUD, VASH, and palliative care. She joined the Women Veterans Program in December of 2021. So as a reminder, the VA Health team is also here to provide mental health support. So what we're going to do is we're going to shift the presentation to Ms. Yolanda Hagan, and you can use the chat feature to connect Dr. Novotny and Chelsea and the whole team and send your questions. And if you wish to speak with them in person or by phone, we also have that opportunity. All right, and I'd now like to welcome Ms. Yolanda Hagan.
Yolanda, I'm having some technical issues, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in. I'm not able to see the slides, but I do have them up on my screen. I don't know if other people are having trouble seeing the slides as well.
All right, thank you.
If you can navigate to slide 2, if that's good.
Let me see if we can get the slides for you, Chelsea. And Ricky, let us know.
This is Julene. Sorry, guys, we're having some technical issues with the slides. We're trying to get them up as quickly as possible. I apologize.
I'll just talk a little bit from the slides I have about Women Veteran Services at the VA Northern California Healthcare System. So we are so honored to be here today presenting to all of you about what our Women Veterans Program at the VA Northern California has to offer. And so thank you for having us today to speak about this very important topic. So a big piece of what we offer is healthcare. And so we offer preventative screening like pap smears, mammography, bone density testing. We offer this to women veterans, both at the VA and as the VA paying for community care. We also have maternity care benefits, including newborn care for 7 days, maternity belts, breast pumps. You might see one I have behind me in my office. We offer reproductive health care, birth control, preconception counseling, emergency contraceptive available. And then we have gynecological services. So addressing abdominal bleeding, pelvic pain, urinary incontinence, and cancer care. Additionally, we have a great program here that provides breast care navigation. So for women who may have a breast cancer diagnosis or have additional breast care needs, we actually have a dedicated nurse who follows those women and provides extensive support. We also have a breast cancer peer support program through that breast care navigation program, where we connect women who may have been recently diagnosed with breast cancer or going through breast cancer treatment with peer support specialists here at the VA and who have had their own breast cancer journey. We offer menopausal support and then a lot of social work support, including support groups, holistic care services, and resources and referrals through our women's health social worker. Additionally, we have mental health. So we have Dr. Navas here, who is our MST, so military sexual trauma recovery coordinator. So we have that component as well as part of our program. So within, just go through the slides now. So you'll be able to see what I'm talking about a little bit here in a second. It's visualized nicely. So we have women's health primary care that we have at Mather and McClellan. We have dedicated comprehensive clinics that are standalone clinics, and we have models at other sites where we have women's health embedded within primary care clinics. And so we all work together to serve women veterans as part of this program. And as years go on, we're anticipating we will continue to expand and offer other programming as part of that. And we've got partnerships going on with mental health, offering different groups. We've got partnerships with recreation therapy, offering different groups. And we're just anticipating that we'll continue to grow because our women veteran population is growing, and they have unique needs that we have to be able to work in this program and serve them. If you can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So there are also additional services. So as technology has expanded, the VA has been trying to keep up and so offer different platforms for all veterans. But Yolanda created this slide that has some information about some different programs that some different apps and phone numbers that you can contact or women veterans can contact to get services. So these include things like PTSD coach, mindfulness coach, vet change, beyond MST, and aims for anger management, which are apps that you can access on your phone or other mobile device to get support anytime. Additionally, I want to just point out here that there's a women veterans call center. That phone number is 1-855-VA-WOMEN. And so for any woman veteran you know who has questions, needs to be connected to services, wants help enrolling in VA healthcare, wants to understand their eligibility, they can contact that number, get all of that information. And then additionally, we have the Veterans Crisis Line that's available 24/7. That number is 1-800-273-8255. So anyone who is going through any sort of crisis, suicidality, hurting themselves, can contact that Veterans Crisis Line and be connected with a live person who can talk with them. There's also a chat feature now. If needed, they can contact emergency services on their behalf if it's reached that level. And then finally is we have My Healthy Vet, which is the way that we can secure message with veterans who are enrolled in the Women's Health Program. And it's a great platform that veterans can use to access their own healthcare and other information to help navigate it. It's our portal that we use here within the VA. So I think that's it for our presentation. And then Dr. Navas and myself and Yolanda are available for additional questions or support needs. Thank you so much for having us today. And please spread the word about the Women Veterans Program. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. We appreciate you. All right, folks, a reminder, the chat is available for you to connect with the California VA healthcare system. All right. So up next, we have Calvet Secretary, Dr. Vito Imbasciani. Dr. Imbasciani was reappointed Calvet Secretary on January 22nd, 2020. He was commissioned in the U.S. Army Medical Corps in 1986, deployed 4 times in support of the wars in the Gulf, and retired after 27 years in 2014 with the rank of colonel. He has practiced urologic surgery in Los Angeles since 1991 and is presently the past president of the LA County Medical Association and past president of the California Urologic Association. Sir, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Hi there, Social. Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary Murillo. I'm sorry for being late. I just absented myself from a meeting of California Housing Finance Authority board meeting. I'm really sorry. I'm trying to be in 2 places at once, but this is an extraordinarily important and timely matter that I insisted on being part of. I am Vito Imbasciani. I'm the Secretary of Calvet. And I want to thank everybody for joining us and welcome you all. And thank you especially to the blessing and prayer that was given to us by Roy in the beginning, Mr. De La Rosa. I appreciate that very much. And I thank our federal partners for going first and filling in my absence. Let me start by making an observation. I'm not going to talk for very long because Social has lined up an extraordinary line of talent that are going to speak specifically. I want to give a high overview of this issue. We all know that we live in the most diverse state in the union. When I get my ballot, I have the option of 53 languages. I drive down the streets of Los Angeles where I live, and I see many, many different kinds of houses of worship. People live in the desert, in the high mountains, or on the coast. Alpine County has 1,800 citizens. Los Angeles County has 10 million. That diversity extends to its ethnic populations. It's astounding to me that there are over 150 Native American tribes living in the state of California. Among them, comprising them, more than 700,000 indigenous people who call California home are right here. And more than 24,000 of them are military veterans to whom I have a specific sworn and personal obligation to serve. These are military veterans who have served honorably and proudly in this country's armed forces going all the way back to before the Civil War. In fact, and this is a well-known fact now, no ethnic group in California has, or across the country for that matter, has served as a greater percentage of its population than Native Americans. Translated or said in a different way, more Native Americans serve as a proportion of their population than any other ethnic group in the country. As the state agency responsible for serving all of Californians, I feel it's imperative that we address the needs of our Native American brothers and sisters, and that we continue to create space for understanding and dialogue. And that's what brings us here today. Last December, the Yurok Tribal Council declared a state of emergency due to the enormous number of missing persons and attempted human trafficking incidents that have occurred just in Humboldt County in Northern California. Chairman Joseph L. James of the Yurok tribe asked publicly for local, state, and federal partners to, and I quote, take a stronger stand against the trafficking of Native women and girls, end of quote. Well, Calvet hopes to magnify the effort and the plea inherent in that chief's quotation. And by educating veterans and service providers, some of whom are here today on this webinar through this panel of experts. We're going to hear from those representing Native American veterans. We're going to hear from, as we just did, from some of the representatives of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and from the state of California Tribal Relations Specialists. We're going to hear from law enforcement, and we're going to hear from victims advocates. They all bring extensive knowledge and tremendous compassion to their efforts. And I tell you that in any way that Calvet can bring resources and education to our various stakeholders and partners, we are not only happy to do so, we feel obligated to do so. I'm honored, as is Social, to host this forum today. I thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'm now going to pass the baton back to Social Rodriguez Murillo, Calvet's Deputy Secretary of our Minority and Underrepresented Veterans Division. Thank you, Social, and thank you for putting this together.
Thank you for joining us, sir. We wish you all the best today. We appreciate it. All right, folks, here to provide an update from the governor's administration is Christina Snyder, tribal advisor to Governor Newsom. Christina's work focuses primarily on tribal law and policy with experience in tribal tax, economic development, gaming, child welfare, juvenile justice, cultural resource protection, voting rights, and government relations at the state and federal levels. She is an enrolled member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians. Welcome, Christina.
Sorry for the delay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to join you all for this critical discussion today. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm joining you from the ancestral homelands of the Patwin peoples. My name is Christina Snyder, and I'm Mihilakana and Makamo, and a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians up in Sonoma County. And I currently serve as the tribal advisor for Governor Gavin Newsom. During Governor Newsom's time in office, we've had several discussions on how he might make a difference for our people, and he's demonstrated a willingness and a commitment to do better for California Native communities and Native communities in general in California. The governor has embraced an approach that is grounded in the history of this state and its treatment of California Native Americans since its inception. The lens through which our administration views all of our work is that all Californians are best served when our systems, laws, and policies reflect the diversity and richness of all cultures in California. And we have to approach this work through a lens that fully and honestly accounts for everything these diverse populations have experienced up to this point. In working from this viewpoint, the state is in a better position to address current and ongoing systemic problems and engaging and integrating California Native Americans and their valuable contributions by taking a critical and honest look at the historical root of these issues and the state's role in that history. We very much understand that many of the issues facing California Native peoples today stems from a history of neglect and violence, in which state and federal actors benefited from divesting Native people of their lands, lifeways, and lives while offloading responsibilities for those same people. Criminal justice gaps, treating Native people as exiles in their own places, locked out of systems of care and community, and aligned legislation has created a situation that prevents all of us from being able to adequately care for our people. The state is now in a position to work to address these long-term injustices in partnership with tribes and the federal government, make space for Native people, and reorient how we can think about our collective future. We're in a position to change our attitudes and resources and to address the tragedy of missing and murdered Native peoples. And under Governor Newsom, we're doing what we can to support these efforts, both by assisting tribes in building capacity and by reorienting how we address criminal justice situations involving Native peoples. At a high level, the governor has created a Truth and Healing Council who will examine the historical conditions that have created many of the justice gaps we see today, as well as how to incorporate restorative justice principles to address these gaps through real and meaningful change. Through the Tribal Nation Grant Fund, a multi-million-dollar tribally funded and led grant program administered by the state for smaller tribes, we're seeing tribes throughout the state build out critical public safety resources, including monitoring of large land bases to secure against illicit activity, installing security fences and lighting, and funding court and law enforcement programs, resources, and facilities. Through the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, we're administering critical services and resources for Native victims of crime to ensure that they have the resources they need to receive trauma-informed care and to address some of the targeted instances of violence against Native peoples. Most recently, on December 31st, 2021, Governor Newsom announced the launch of California's new program to compensate survivors of state-sponsored sterilization, created as part of the 2021-22 state budget package. Beginning January 1st of this year, survivors of state-sponsored sterilization can apply for compensation through the California's Forced or Involuntary Sterilization Compensation Program, which is being administered by the California Victim Compensation Board. That program is available to surviving individuals who were sterilized at or while living in state-run hospitals, homes, and institutions from 1909 through 1979, or survivors of forced or involuntary sterilization in California state prisons or other correctional facilities while in the custody of the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation after 1979. The governor's office has also incorporated a consideration of the unique circumstances of tribal communities and Native peoples when considering clemency for offenders of crimes against Native peoples. We understand that as home to the largest population of Native peoples generally, and with programs that historically incentivized relocation of individuals and families, or facilitated the breakup of families and communities of care like the boarding schools, the state has a large and diverse community of Native peoples under our care. When these cases arise for consideration, we undergo a process of tribal consultation that seeks to understand the impact to the entire community, as well as the integrity of the tribe of the crime against a member of their tribe. We also try to account for the fact that prosecutions of these crimes against Native peoples have not always had the full support or backing of the state justice system. And we seek to make these systems more accountable to Native peoples who are often far from their tribes, communities, and families. These changes are not happening in a vacuum. Most critically in this space, tribes, California Native people, and Native people everywhere have spoken up and shown up to tell the state and the federal government what is happening to their members and what is needed to make things right. And the state, throughout all its branches, has recognized the critical need to address these issues and to be responsive and accountable to Native communities and families, and to really demonstrate that Native peoples matter and that we care. So I urge tribal communities and allies to keep speaking up, showing us, and telling us how to do better. It's now my honor and pleasure to hand it over to Jessica Carter, or back to Xochitl, I'm not quite sure. But very excited to have following me the court director of the Yurok tribe, who has been so instrumental to keeping the state accountable and to helping us see opportunities to do better. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christina. We appreciate the update. That's correct. Here to provide an overview is Jessica Carter, Court Director to the Yurok tribe, with 12 years of service developing the tribal justice system. She is a member of the Yurok tribe and descends from a long line of traditional healers in Northern California. Jessica is a member of the California Bar, and she earned a master's degree in American Indian Studies from UCLA. Her master's thesis, Keeping Watch, the Poligla and Their Lands, studied the victimization of the Yurok people by the loss of their homelands beginning in 1850 to the present. She currently oversees numerous restorative justice programs specifically targeted at addressing substance abuse, domestic violence, child abuse, neglect, and missing and murdered Indigenous people. Jessica, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me. I do have one slide to present. Here at the tribal court, we do provide various programs and services for individuals, our tribal members that are involved in the justice system. One of the projects that we do oversee recently, we started in 2019, was our Taki Skui Sane Wachek program. And that translates into I will see you again in a good way. It is our missing and murdered Indigenous peoples program. I do have a slide. I don't see it. I just see a picture of myself. But the project itself looked at the data and wanted to tell the stories of the families, what they experienced when one of their people went missing. So the first year was collecting that data, looking at the data, and then collecting the stories, not only from the families, but also the partnering agencies. And then we also we did the second year report, focusing mostly on the different areas of where our Native people can become vulnerable to becoming missing or murdered. So we had various topic areas that we focused on. We're doing group survivor sessions for those that do come back, as well as the families that need supportive services. We've developed a database, and we've collected the number of those that are missing and murdered here in Northern California. It's definitely a higher number in Humboldt County. The Yurok tribe itself encompasses both Humboldt and Del Norte County. So we're right in where we have currently 174 cases that we've documented in our database. There's a slide. Right now in our second year, or our third year, we're working on protocols, both to advocate at the local, state, and federal levels. As mentioned earlier, we did have a declaration of a state of emergency. We have a few local young Native women that have gone missing. We've gathered resources to try to, unfortunately, find these individuals. We're still looking. We're gathering tips to try to find these individuals, to find resolve for these families. We also had recently 3 trafficking attempts on our young Native mothers and their children. So that's what brought the awareness to our tribal council. And we're thankful that our tribal council here took such a hard stand against it. They want to make sure that they're honoring our young Native women. And they've been very supportive and trying to find resolutions, not only to find those individuals that are missing, but to prevent this from happening and making sure that we're bringing awareness to our tribal people. And you can find a copy of both reports on our website at theyuroktribalcourt.org. And again, we are working on our 3rd annual report, which will be out in July of this year. And you can see it with the map of California and the number of documented missing and murdered Indigenous people in the state that we've collected. And you can see Humboldt County is unfortunately the dark blue one. And I'm done with my slides.
Fantastic, Jessica. Thank you for this overview. Data is very important for all of our partners coming together to help combat the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous people. We appreciate the introduction and the presentation. And now, folks, here to give us an overview of California's response to the missing murdered Native American crisis and the creation of the Tribal Assistance Program within the Department of Justice's Office of Native American Affairs is Ms. Mary Lopez Kiefer. Mary was appointed as a director of the Office of Native American Affairs and the Office of the Attorney General, California Department of Justice in April of 2020. She is a member of and chief legal counsel to the San Luis Rey Band Mission of Indians. As chief legal counsel for the last 20 years, she conducted over 1,000 government-to-government consultations at all levels of government for the protection of her tribe's cultural resources and sacred places. Mary is the chairperson to the University of California Office of the President's Native American Advisory Council, and she is a member of the Board of Trustees for California Indian Legal Services. Mary, thank you for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you, Sochi. I just want to again say thank you for that warm welcome. Also letting everyone know that I am joining you today from the traditional and culturally affiliated territories of the Bay Miwok and Ohlone people. And I wanted to say thank you and express my gratitude to CalVets for inviting California's Department of Justice and myself to partner with you and contribute to this very important webinar today on missing murdered Indigenous people, especially this month being the National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. I also would like to express my gratitude and thanks to the veterans of our state and our country for your commitment to us as individuals, our families, our communities, and for our country. So thank you for your service and your sacrifices. I will be sharing today with you about the Department of Justice's responsibilities in the implementation of AB 3099 and Attorney General Bonta's commitment to working in collaboration and coordination with our local, state, tribal, and federal government partners and our survivors and families impacted by loved ones who have gone missing or have become victims of homicides. Next slide. The importance here of this slide is before we can actually talk about California's response to missing murdered Indigenous people or Native American people is first we need actually the slide before this. Sorry about that, the population. We need to have some foundational information. And that information starts with our population And the governor's tribal advisor, Christina Snyder, did a fabulous job and is doing a fabulous job in the governor's office and making sure people are becoming more aware of the state's population of Native Americans. We are home to one of the largest populations of American Indians, Alaska Natives. And that I know we are being joined today by others outside of the state. So I just want to make sure everybody knows some basic information when it comes to California. We are home to 177 California Native American tribes and a little over 100 reservations and rancherias. That 177 tribes consists of both federally recognized tribes and non-federally recognized tribes. Our state has the most non-federally recognized tribes, and these are tribes that are identified on the Native American Heritage Contact List. Of those 100 reservations and rancherias, they are located throughout our state, and they are neighbors to 34 of our 58 counties. The Native American population represents approximately 3.6% of California's population, and Los Angeles is home to the largest share of the Native American community at 21% of the American Indian Alaskan Native population. And for gender, the gender distribution is approximately equal, meaning it's approximately 50% men and women, boys and girls. Next slide. A brief history. Otherwise, I'm going to use all my time if we talk about the traumatic and violent history and stories of perseverance of California's Native American population. For here, I would direct you to Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-1519, where it talks about the unspeakable traumas that were experienced by the Native American population in California. Mostly though, as the tribal advisor mentioned, there has been much brought to light over the last few years and through the Truth and Healing Council about the state's involvement in the 18 unratified treaties, the laws of the state that allow children to be forcefully taken from their families, instituting indentured servitude in Native Americans of all ages and genders, and the role it played in Indian boarding schools. Just some of the factors that you need to take into consideration in regards to the state's response to missing murdered Indigenous people. Most importantly is the federal law of Public Law 83280, also known as PL 280 or Public Law 280, and that law expressly transferred the federal criminal jurisdiction over most crimes committed by or against Native Americans on Indian or tribal land from the federal government to the state. And that was for 6 specific states, and California is one of those mandatory states. And although it's been in existence for almost 70 years, PL 280's complexity can and has led to public safety uncertainty and frustration among tribal communities and their neighbors, the local county communities. And this uncertainty and frustration has unfortunately resulted in PL 280 being applied inconsistently throughout the state. Next slide. With that all in mind, Assembly Bill 3099 was authored by California's first California Native American to be elected to our state legislature, Assemblymember James Ramos, and signed into law by Governor Newsom in 2020. The bill was funded in 2021, and it has been identified as California's response to addressing public safety concerns on tribal lands and missing murdered Native American people. The implementation of AB 3099 will have impact on public safety concerns for all California's Native American population. It is not limited to only Native American citizens on tribal lands. It is applicable throughout the state. Specifically, it created a new tribal assistance program within the Department of Justice's Office of Native American Affairs, and it had two specific components. However, even though they are two separate components, they are definitely interrelated given the history and life experiences of California's Native American population. Next slide. Okay, so what did it do? The first component is about Public Law 280 and what the state needs to do to address those complexities that have been revealed and also the inconsistencies throughout the state of how it's being applied. So this first component really requires the Department of Justice to step in to provide specific training and guidance to law enforcement, as well as to tribal governments with or without law enforcement about Public Law 280, as well as crime reporting, statistics, as well, like statistical database reporting, but also victim assistance and victim rights. Next slide. The component of the law that's the subject of this webinar also deals specifically with a study that is mandated by the law that Department of Justice must conduct regarding identification and reporting of missing, murdered Indigenous people or Native Americans in California. And then the second component, which is calling for a report and recommendations to be made to the legislature based on the findings of that study. Next slide. It's important to note that there are specific deliverables or requirements of the study that the DOJ must address. These are the minimums that the state must do. We must determine the scope of the issue of missing, murdered Native American peoples in California. That currently is not reported on or made available publicly. So that is something the Department of Justice must do. We must identify barriers in reporting or investigating missing or murdered Native American in California. And we must learn how to create partnerships to increase cross-reporting. Cross-reporting is where local law enforcement and tribal law enforcement would share information that is currently not occurring statewide. Next slide. And lastly, Department of Justice's report to the legislature. There is specific deliverables required here as well. The Department of Justice must make sure that we're providing data analysis of the number of missing and murdered Native Americans in California to the legislature. We must identify the barriers to providing state resources to address missing, murdered Native American people to the legislature. And our recommendations may include proposed legislation to improve the reporting and identification of missing, murdered Native American people in California. Next slide. So there's been a lot happening in our nation and in fellow states regarding missing, murdered Indigenous people and Native Americans. And that is something we are very aware of. We've been keeping track of. There's been a federal response, and I believe Tasha will be speaking to that directly, to missing, murdered Indigenous people. They had Operation Lady Justice. There's been Savannah's Act and the Not Invisible Act. There has been state response to missing, murdered Indigenous people. 10 states have begun to assess the crisis within their own borders. We are aware of those reports. We have analyzed those reports. It's important to note that 9 of the 10 states that have finished their initial reports and recommendations, that they are identifying the systemic barriers to tracking violence against Indigenous women, and that those barriers include racial misclassification, jurisdictional issues, and a significant distrust of law enforcement. Next slide. These are the most common recommendations from the 9 states that have published their reports. And the first is what we're doing today, which is increasing the awareness and education of missing, murdered Native American people. The second is to improve and increase data collection efforts and access to data systems by non-governmental entities. The third is to improve and increase law enforcement trainings on interacting with tribal people and reporting protocols. And lastly, to improve law enforcement relationships and engagement with tribes. So you can see from the recommendations that were coming out of the states, these are already pretty well reflected in Assembly Bill 3099, directing the Department of Justice to look into these issues. Next slide. So armed with all this information and the commitment from Attorney General Bonta and the Department of Justice, we are dedicated to addressing the challenges identified in 3099. And this will be a multi-disciplined approach by the Department of Justice in implementing Assembly Bill 3099. This is, it will be managed and overseen by the Office of Native American Affairs, but we will be partnered with the Division of Law Enforcement within the Attorney General's Office and Department of Justice, as well as our Criminal Justice Information Services Research Center, so that we can be able to approach it in a inclusive way, so that we will have law enforcement present, and we will also have the community having a seat at the table, as well as our sister agencies. Our intention moving forward is to have community engagement, collaboration sessions to discuss MMI NAP, and to be inclusive, as I said, of all perspectives on the issues presented. So with that, I just want to again emphasize Attorney General Bonta's commitment to a successful implementation of AB 3099. Next slide. Before I leave you, I wanted to make sure that I shared with you resources for learning more about how you can help in this area of discussion that we're having today. These are all resources that are available on the Attorney General's website for California. And it'll be information on California's efforts on missing, murdered Native American people. They'll have links to the law itself, as well as materials that'll benefit, especially alerting to the federal resources, information on California's missing and unidentified persons database, information on identifying human trafficking, and information on getting help for victims. And I'll go ahead and put all these links in the chat, so they're available to all the attendees. And I will make sure to put my contact information in as well, which is reading my mind. Next slide. All right. Again, thank you for inviting me to participate in today's webinar. And I look forward to answering any questions anyone may have and working together in partnership. Thank you.
Mary, thank you for this presentation from your department and from our State Attorney General. We appreciate having you today.
Thank you.
And at the federal level, the Not Invisible Act of 2019 was signed into law on October 10, 2020. And it created a commission tasked with the mission to combat the epidemic of missing, murdered, and trafficked Native Americans and Alaska Natives. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is one of the participating agencies, is here today to give us an overview on the work they do through the Office of Justice Services. Tasha Guerrero is the National Coordinator for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Office of Justice Services Victim Assistance Program, and she serves as a coordinator for the Not Invisible Act of 2019. Tasha is a member of the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate, and Tasha, feel free to correct me once you begin, and is also of the Spirit Lake Nation and the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. Welcome, Tasha. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sochi, for the introduction and the warm welcome. You did great with the tribal name. I want to say on Petu Washte, good day everyone in Dakota language. It's an honor to be here with you all today. First, I want to say that we know it is important to acknowledge our people who have been murdered, trafficked, or who have gone missing. They are not forgotten, and for them it is important that we remain engaged in this work. Next slide, please. I want to talk with you all about the Not Invisible Act of 2019. The act was signed into law on October 10th of 2020, and the act was sponsored by Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, while she was in Congress. The purpose of the act is to improve the federal government's response to the murder, trafficking, and disappearance of Indigenous persons within the United States, increase coordination and prevention efforts between the Department of the Interior, outside organizations, and other federal agencies as appropriate, as well as to create a joint commission on reducing violent crime against Indians within the Department of the Interior and the Department of Justice. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk with you about the two sections that are in the Act. First, Section 3 is related to the coordinator of federal efforts to combat violence against Native people. Secretary Haaland designated an official coordinator within the Office of Justice Services to coordinate prevention efforts, grants, and programs related to the murder of, trafficking of, and missing Indians across federal agencies. The statute spoke directly to federal partners within the Department of the Interior and the Department of Justice. However, our team knew that those programs and services would include a multitude of agencies. In the statute, the interagency efforts identified include the Bureau of Indian Affairs, as well as the Department of Justice's Office of Justice Programs, the Office on Violence Against Women, the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, the Office of Tribal Justice, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. In total, the Department of the Interior has reached to 34 agencies, which, just to name a few of the additional agencies, includes the Executive Office of the U.S. Attorney's Office of Legal Education, the Department of Homeland Security, as well as the Department of Health and Human Services. Next slide, please. The Not Invisible Act requires that we ensure that the prevention efforts, grants, and programs of federal agencies related to the murder of, trafficking of, and missing Indians consider the unique challenges of combating crime, violence, and human trafficking of Indians and on Indian lands faced by tribal communities, urban centers, and the various divisions of law enforcement, including the BIA, tribal, federal, state, and local levels. The Act, Section 3 of the Act also requires that we work in cooperation with outside organizations with expertise in working with Indian tribes to provide victim-centered and culturally relevant training on how to effectively identify, respond to, and report instances of missing persons, murder, and trafficking within Indian lands and of Indians. Our work thus far has included conducting site visits in Oklahoma and Montana. These two locations were identified by our Not Invisible Act coordination team as suitable for conducting site visits that covered Indian tribes, Indian health services, urban Indian organizations, tribal businesses. We also visited a Bureau of Indian Education boarding school, a university, as well as federal, tribal, and local law enforcement. This presentation in partnership with the California Department of Veteran Affairs is exactly what we are required to do under this law. We do wish to learn more about your unique challenges and what you think is needed to become more victim-centered and culturally relevant. For the participants that are on the training today, At the end of the presentation, I'm going to provide my contact information, and please feel free to contact me or send me any recommendations that you may have. Next slide, please. Section 3 also requires a congressional report. The report will provide information regarding the federal coordination efforts accomplished over the past year. This report will be due annually and will include all previous year activities. The report is submitted to multiple committees, including the Committee on Indian Affairs, the Committee on the Judiciary of the Senate, the Committee on Natural Resources, and the Committee on the Judiciary of the House of Representatives. This report will include a summary of all coordination activities, a summary of all of the trainings, and also recommendations for improving coordination across the federal agencies and of relevant federal programs. Next slide, please. As part of the Section 3 requirements at the Office of Justice Services, we've developed a Not Invisible Act coordination team, which includes the following individuals listed on the slide here. So we have our OJS Director, Jason O'Neill. We also have our OJS Deputy Director, Jason Thompson, Associate Director of Field Operations, Monty Gibson. We have an OJS Writer Editor, Richard Colley, and our OJS Policy Coordinator, Eugenia Tyner-Dawson, as well as myself as the Not Invisible Act Coordinator. Next slide, please. I wanted to share some information with you all about the action plan that we've developed to meet the requirements of the Not Invisible Act. We have multiple phases that we've been working on, and for the first phase, which is the information gathering phase, we've developed a Not Invisible Act overview, an action plan, conversation protocol, and we've captured information about prevention efforts, grants, and programs, which have been provided to the 4 departments that we are partnering with, including the Department of the Interior, the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and also the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as their multitude of agencies. We've conducted multiple meetings with the agencies on how to structure the data call from us. We've met with their points of contact from each federal partner to discuss all of the documents that we've developed and also to talk about our protocol. For phase 2, the assessment phase, we've reviewed all of the submissions from our federal partners, as well as for phase 3, we've reviewed and assessed the information that's been submitted regarding existing training. For phase 4, the report writing phase, the report currently is in draft. It's in the final clearance process for year 1 activities. As of January, we've completed phases 1 through 4. And the last phase will be to report the submission or the final report to Congress after the clearance process is completed. Next slide, please. We are also beginning year 2 activities. We're currently planning for a virtual Department of Interior and Department of Justice joint Tribal Justice, Safety, and Wellness Summit. This has been tentatively scheduled for June 6th through the 9th of this year. And this summit is going to be provided to tribal leaders, justice personnel, subject matter experts, and providers. And please stay tuned as we will be completing the registration process soon for that summit. We're also going to be continuing to coordinate with additional agencies this year who perform some of the activities that I've discussed. We're going to be reaching out to the Department of Labor, the National Indian Gaming Commission, as well as the Department of Homeland Security Center for Countering Human Trafficking. We're going to be providing additional trainings this year. We're also going to provide support to the commission, and I'm going to talk about the commission here shortly, as well as preparing the year 2 congressional report. Next slide, please. So the second section of the Act is Section 4. Which is related to the establishment of the Department of the Interior and the Department of Justice's Joint Commission on Reducing Violent Crime Against Indians. On August 4th of last year, both the Department of the Interior and the Department of Justice announced the next steps in the implementation of the Not Invisible Act. This included the publication of a solicitation for nominations of non-federal members to join the Commission on Reducing Violent Crime Against American Indian and Alaska Natives, to address the longstanding missing and murdered Indigenous persons crisis. Both the Department of the Interior and the Department of Justice consulted with tribal leaders in August and September of last year related to the commission and also the implementation of the act. The Department of the Interior and the Department of Justice have selected nominee candidates whose names have been forwarded to the White House for vetting. We anticipate that the Attorney General and Secretary Holland's selections may occur by the end of this month. For additional information about the Not Invisible Act Commission, you can visit the website here. And I will also put the information in the chat so you have access to that. The point of contact for the Not Invisible Act Section 4 is Heidi Todacini, and her email address is listed here, and I will also put contact information in the chat as well. If you do have any questions or recommendations related to the Not Invisible Act Section 3, please feel free to contact me directly at the information listed here. And if you do have any overall questions about the Office of Justice Services, please feel free to reach out to our OJS Director, Jason O'Neill. At OJS, we are humbled, by the opportunity to work on the Not Invisible Act. We have a fantastic and dedicated team that works together to make these needs more visible. I want to thank the California Department of Veteran Affairs for the opportunity to share this information with you all, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tasha. We appreciate all of the information, folks. We have some great resources, and I'll remind you at the end of our presentation of our program where you can locate that information for these resources. All right, and as the State Department of Veterans Affairs, we work closely with our national U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs to provide you information. And I want to thank the department who initially brought the concept to us to hold this webinar. So we are very grateful for your partnership. So here to provide these national update from the Department of Veterans Affairs is Stephanie Birdwell, Director to the Office of Tribal Government Relations. Ms. Birdwell is the first Director of the VA Office of Tribal Government Relations. She served in various capacities focused on Indian affairs for over 20 years in the federal and tribal government sectors, and currently leads her team and agency colleagues in efforts and activities that facilitate access to healthcare benefits and increased economic sustainability for veterans living in Indian country. She is responsible for the development and strategic planning of OTDR, assisting the VA with enhancing and establishing nation-to-nation relationships with 574 federally recognized tribes through the implementation of the VA Tribal Consultation Policy. And joining her today, of course, is Terry Bentley. Terry Bentley is a Tribal Government Relations Specialist for the Pacific District Office of Tribal Government Relations at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs since August 2011. She's an enrolled member of the Karuk Tribe in Northern California. Her Pacific District covers Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Nevada, California, and Alaska. And I'm sure she'll go over this information as well. She's the daughter of a veteran and granddaughter of a World War II veteran and has a 34-year VA career. Terry has a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from Eastern Oregon University and has widespread experience in working with tribal governments and tribal communities. Very good. And with that, I'll pass it on to Stephanie and Terry. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. And it's a real honor to be here with you all and have the opportunity to address this audience. So I will try to, I know that we're running short on time, so I'll try to be very efficient with our presentation, and we'll also then pass the reins over to Terry to offer some remarks as well. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. A point that I kind of want to make up front is that every one of us, every one of our team at the VA Office of Tribal Government Relations, we call ourselves a small but mighty team. We have staff all over the country, and we essentially are a staff office to the VA Secretary focusing on tribal affairs. But this issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and persons is something that it's something that not only is critical to the community that we serve in our professional capacity, but it's something that's personally very meaningful and that has touched every one of our lives individually as Native people. Every staff member on our team is Native, just so happens to be. VA does not have any Indian preference necessarily in their employment or hiring requirements, but our team is again very committed professionally and personally to this issue. And so I wanted to acknowledge that. I also wanted to say up front, and again in the interest of time, that we partnered with the HHS Administration for Native Americans on a webinar focused on this topic. They provided a very excellent overview of the issue, and we have a recording that's available that we can share post-webinar if folks would like to have the chance to hear that. Again, it was a very good presentation. And also this map is not, certainly it's nothing that's very high tech or sophisticated, but just to kind of direct everyone. But I think it does a real nice kind of simple job of kind of outlining the team and the area that we cover. So Terry Bentley, our tribal government relations specialist for the area we call the Western region, is based out in Oregon. And she covers all of the states out west in the gray, including Alaska. Of course, there are 229 federally recognized tribal entities in Alaska and well over 100 in California. And so that Terry has a very rich background professionally working in that part of the country. And she's a real, very good resource and a point of contact to coordinate with regard to if you have questions as service providers with regard to the prevalence of this issue, or if something is affecting a veteran or community that you're working with directly. Again, Terry's an excellent resource. Our colleagues, Homina Powiki down in the Southwest. Homina is herself a Navajo, and she's also Hopi, and she works with tribes in the Four Corners regions. She came to our office over 10 years ago from the Veterans Health Administration, and she has a strong background in data. Peter Vicaire up in Minneapolis works with tribes in the area shaded yellow. Peter is himself a Marine. He is Micmac from Maine, and he holds joint law degrees from the United States and Canada. And Peter does a lot of the review when we're called upon to evaluate different policies and legislation that are affecting Native veterans. I was a VA headquarters reporting person, but during the pandemic, I am now based out of Oklahoma City. So I'm co-located with Mary Culley. Mary is an Air Force vet. Mary works with tribes in the Southern Plains and the Southeastern United States. And then our colleague Clay Ward works out of the DC office, and he's a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. So these are the faces of the individuals that you may want to reach out to and can help with any questions with regard to the subject matter, or can coordinate presentations at the federal VA level. I should also mention that we have a tribal consultation mailbox. Sometimes, with government agencies, you don't know who is behind that mailbox or who's checking that information and patching it forward to the front office, the secretary's office. That is myself and Clay. So you know who is the face behind the email. Next slide. So there's 3 goals or activities of our office to facilitate the tribal consultation policy, which VA has had in place for about 10 years and is undergoing revisions currently. There's a new VA advisory committee on tribal and Indian affairs that will have their first meeting next week. The tribal consultation policy includes some responsibilities of the advisory committee, and the updates will reflect those responsibilities. Our other focus goal is to engage in activities that promote increased access to healthcare and benefits for veterans living in Indian country as well as urban areas, and facilitate economic sustainability for veterans living in Indian country and urban areas. So basically what that means is our team on a day-to-day basis, anything that we're involved in really always touches upon one of those 3 goals. Where we are in the VA as an organization, we're part of the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. So we have colleagues that work with state departments of Veterans Affairs, colleagues that work on international relations, and of course ours is the Tribal Affairs team. Next slide. Again, some of this information has been covered previously, and our role is to really work very closely with VA on an enterprise-wide basis to really understand that tribal governments or political entities that have a historic and present relationship, modern relationship with the VA as an agent of the federal government, and that it's critical that VA not make decisions about tribes without tribes. So a lot of the work that we do is constantly educating and explaining and helping agency be effective and prepared and respectful in their engagements with tribal governments. Next slide. There's a VA Indian Health Service MOU that was recently updated in the fall of last year, and that is a book that filled with chapters of collaborative opportunities that exist between the VA and the Indian Health Service, as well as tribal health programs when it comes to reaching and serving Native veterans. Next slide. VA purchases care from IHS, the Indian Health Service, and over 115 tribal health programs. Of course, in California, there are no Indian Health Service direct service locations. They are all tribal health program locations. So that means that those healthcare facilities receive funding from the VA for care provided to VHA enrolled veterans. And then we anticipate that there in the future, due to some amendments to those reimbursement agreements, that there may be even stronger or closer care coordination between the VA, Indian Health Service, and tribal health programs. So it's more important. It's always important, but it's very, very, very much a front burner issue with that increased engagement, that VA have a strong understanding of what those issues are that are most affecting the Native community. Next slide. Native veterans legislation. There's a lot going on in this space, a lot of kind of moving parts right now. As I mentioned, I'll just kind of quickly go through the bullets. The VA is looking at expanding reimbursements to the Indian Health Service and tribal health programs to reimburse for a category of care called purchase referred care. Purchase referred care is the specialty care budget, to kind of put it in a nutshell. So it would almost be analogous to the VHA community care budget. So it really begins to kind of work with tribal and Indian healthcare systems kind of on their own terms, if you will. So that, and that would also increase the collaboration between the agencies as well as VA and tribal health programs. There is legislation that has been enacted that basically says that as of January 5th, 2022, veterans who are American Indian and Alaska Native who meet the definition of Indian in the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act are no longer subject to co-pays issued co-pays by the VA for their care. There is internal ongoing discussion within VA with regard to how to identify this population. Hopefully there's going to be some decisions made at a very high level, and there will be rules promulgated for how to administer this. So this is that second bullet is really transformational. I mean, it really, like I say, in a nutshell, it's basically the deal that American Indian and Alaska Native people receive for healthcare from the United States, as delivered by the Indian Health Service and a lot of times tribal health programs, would basically be matched by the VA, is kind of in a nutshell. The state veterans homes grants. Many of you are aware that there are state veterans homes nationwide where the funding is given to the states to administer these homes. There, of course, these are in operation in California. Tribes have now been added as entities that can apply for these grants. So the tribes can actually apply for and then also construct and operate a veterans home that would look like a state veterans home. HUD-VASH, tribal HUD-VASH, 26 tribes receive tribal HUD-VASH vouchers that of course help alleviate the problems that veterans in tribal communities are struggling with when it comes to homelessness. And urban Indian health programs are now part of the family, if you will, of the VA IHS Tribal Reimbursement Agreement Program. We don't know of any other than the two in Oklahoma urban Indian organizations or urban Indian health programs that participate in the reimbursement agreement program, but we hope that that's going to change. And of course, that would certainly impact urban communities in California. Next slide. Let's see, this letter includes the VA Tribal Advisory Committee on Indian Affairs appointees. Significant to note that Mr. Tewa Ted Tenorio, who's on this call, is going to be representing the California area. We're very honored and excited to have him serve. and look forward to supporting his leadership. Also, a couple of noteworthy appointments: Sonia Tetnowski, who is actually Macaw, but she leads the Santa Clara Indian Health Center up in the Bay Area. She is representing the urban Indian community, and we also have a representative that will be representing the Native Hawaiian community. Again, it's 15 members, and this slide deck basically details the individuals who will be serving in their geographic areas. Next slide. Just we like to use this as a visual to kind of give an example of the IHS, Indian Health Service areas, as compared to the VA VISNs. There actually is an overlap. Sometimes you'll have multiple VISNs covering different Indian Health Service areas. Something that's also kind of important about this is a lot of advisory groups, including the VA advisory group, which is statutorily created, are aligned by historic BIA and IHS areas. So for the VA Tribal Advisory Committee, you've got someone from Portland, Mr. Tenorio's from California. You've got someone representing Phoenix, Albuquerque, Oklahoma City. So those are so 12 of the VA Tribal Advisory Committee members, they track in terms of the geography they represent on these IHS areas. And then of course there are a total of 15. So the other 3 represent the at-large urban Indian community, which is something that's important to mention. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, urban Indian organizations, and then Hawaii. Next slide. Of course, Mr. Tenorio, very honored to have him with us. And next slide. And regional updates. Again, I know we're running short on time, but I'll go ahead and turn this over to my colleague, Terry, to step in and take it from here. Thank you.
Ayuki, hello everyone. Yutuva, thank you for having us on this webinar today. It's such an honor to be a part of this really important discussion. I just want to number one say thank you for the veterans that are on this webinar today. We hold all of you up and your family members and any of those that may be impacted by this horrible crimes that are occurring in Indian country across the United States. I think first and foremost, we just wanted to recognize that it's important when you're working with our Native people that you know where they come from and the resources potentially within their tribal communities, and helping make that connection to those resources, in addition, obviously, to other federal, state, and community resources. Next slide. Next slide, if you can pass this one. This is one that I think slid in there. It's important, but for some of those providers that are on the call, again, this is a website that you can go to find out tribes in and around your surrounding areas, or if you're faced with a patient or client that has identified themselves as Native, where you can relate to where they're from and maybe any potential resources within their tribal communities. Next slide. This is the VA Community Provider Toolkit. There are lots of wonderful resources for those providers that are working with veterans in Indian country and urban areas. And the link is provided there. Just wanted to make you aware of this potential resource. Next slide. Some of the activities we're doing in light of pandemic times, it's been a little challenging. We've been switched mostly to virtual, which I hope to get back to in-person soon. Hosting some in-person claims clinic, I hope in 2022, which is connecting veterans and their family members to benefits. We'll continue to do what we call our WebEx Wednesdays virtual seminars or webinars, and continue to participate in value efforts like this, and continue to partner with our tribal communities. Next slide. This is all of our contact information, as Stephanie pointed out at the beginning, on our map, our main website, how to reach us, how to consult with VA. The links are there. Again, I just want to say thank you so much for this time. Thank you for your service and sacrifice to our great nation. And my prayers to all those family members that have been impacted by this effort that we're discussing today. So thank you again.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Terry. It's a pleasure to have you today and for all the information you provided to us. All right, folks. So in working with veteran organizations, we always like to invite organizations serving our veterans. And if you have Googled out there what veteran organizations are available to you, you have found that we have diverse organizations from different backgrounds. And so here today, we have the Native American Veterans Association for this webinar. Ted Tenorio is the president of the Native American Veterans Association. He will give us an overview of the resources available to veterans through this organization. Now, Ted joined NAVA as board member and vice president in 2003. He helped develop the association's strategic plan and goals and has brought NAVA to state and national attention, building partnerships that enable NAVA to provide veteran resources and services. Mr. Tenorio's work has brought awareness to Native Americans in the military, veterans, and their families. Most recently, as mentioned by Ms. Stephanie Birdwell, he was appointed to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Advisory Committee on Tribal and Indian Affairs, and Ted is based out of Southern California. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you. I am very honored to be here and to share what the Native American and Indian Veterans Association has to offer. Next slide. NAVA's vision and mission. We are a 501c3 corporation that serves and honors men and women currently serving in the military and those who have served. NAVA helps veterans and their families transition from the warrior's journey to civilian life. NAVA provides adjustment assistance, family counseling, support, and link to mental health, wellness services, education, and career assistance. Next slide. So what do? We have a call center, resource, and referral system that we use throughout Los Angeles. Collaborative, we are with Unitas, a national network of other service agencies of diversity, equity, inclusion to improve people's health and well-being. We have veterans and family counseling, Dr. Gills and Dr. Jameson. They are at the VA Greater Health system in West Los Angeles. Veterans Health and Wellness family events. We hold quarterly health fairs throughout the county of Los Angeles. We also host talking circles each month on the second Saturday. We provide peer support and invite guest speakers on various subjects relating to veterans benefits and resources. We also conduct webinars, and one is with the Veterans Business Outreach for veterans in travel entrepreneurial all-day workshops. That's been very successful. And we also present traditional and cultural summits and powwows. In summary, NAVA is working with Native American Women Veterans Group to assist to help missing and murdered Indigenous people. We are providing mental health resources with doctors, clinics, and the VA. We are providing education and health resources. Finally, NAVA appreciates this forum, which will be able to make new connections to better assist Native American women, veterans, and families in the future. Thank you. Next slide. If you want contact information, you can contact us via info@navavets.org. Here is our website at navavets.org, and also our phone number. We pride ourselves by saying that the Native American Veterans Association, in our medicine wheel, we cover the 4 directions, and we connecting the warrior's journey and transforming veterans' lives and community. Thank you. Back to Ochi.
Ed, thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Friends, we're now going to open up to a few questions we have received online. Ms. Virginia Wimmer, Deputy Secretary to the Calvet Women Veterans Division, will lead today's Q&A session. Ms. Wimmer was appointed on August 24, 2021 by Governor Newsom as Deputy Secretary of Women Veterans Affairs. She is a 26-year U.S. Air Force veteran, having served in security forces, healthcare, recruiting, and as a career counselor. Prior to Calvet, she worked as a veteran benefits counselor and county veteran service officer. And earlier this year, she was honored as one of 27 women veteran trailblazers by the U.S. Veterans Affairs Center for Women Veterans. She is a certified mental health first aid facilitator and an applied suicide intervention and skills trainer. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you. Oh, you're muted, ma'am. All right, let's have you increase your volume, ma'am. I don't know if anyone else in the background can hear her. Ma'am, can you hear me? Let's see. I see you, ma'am. For some reason, I can't hear you. Let me see here. Try the volume button on your computer just in case. I have all of mine up. All right. Okay. So we can see you, ma'am, but we can't hear you. Let's see.
Oh.
There we go. I think we hear you.
Okay, let's try this.
Perfect.
Better?
You're good.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so Jessica, this one's to you. How likely is a healthcare provider or service provider to encounter a trafficked person?
No, I was on mute. So we do know that victims of trafficking are often unlikely to have adequate and timely health care, but that sometimes healthcare workers may be the only professionals that interact with victims. As UROC people, we do have a high rate of children being taken and put into foster care. These traumatizing events can then put the children as targets for traffickers. Children experiencing this trauma of being removed from their families, oftentimes from their communities, or that have experienced violence in these homes while they're in foster care, are often vulnerable to being trafficked. We do have teenagers that have been returned from trafficking incidents that report that they were targeted while being homeless, and sometimes they feel trapped. Majority are females, but we do know that males can be exploited too. We know with casinos and truck stops that there's a higher likelihood of being put in a vulnerable situation. But unfortunately, we've had recent events where we've had young women just going to restaurants, to a donut shop, to the zoo and being targeted. So it's not just putting yourself in a vulnerable situation. It's just us being UROC women or UROC mothers that are being targeted for trafficking.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Jessica. So another question that came to us, Roy, with Indigenous culture and tradition in mind, what can a service provider do to respect our Indigenous people?
Well, I think there's a disconnect, and I think there's a misunderstanding because Indigenous culture, Indigenous faith, creation faith, as I experienced it, is not respected by health professionals. Instead, it's looked at something that they placate, and experienced it in the military myself, because 50 years ago when I was active duty during Vietnam, we were not allowed to practice our faith. This was across the board. Yeah. Now fast forward to the future, I am the spiritual advisor for the Native American Veterans Association. I'm Yure Meende, Minam Yaqui and Apache. I also belong to the Big Water clan on my mother's side, and Clearwater clan on my father's side. Now being the spiritual advisor for the Native American Veterans Association, I accepted the Eagle staff you see behind me from Tony Littlehawk, who was our previous spiritual advisor. What we bring to the table and we do for our veterans is first we bring attention to the fact that the spirit is more important than the body. And this is not recognized by health maintenance organizations in any way or kind. This being a fact, I think what needs to be done is health maintenance organizations, as well as the Veterans Administrations, have got to start recognizing that holy men, Native American spirit keepers should have access to patient care, particularly in facilities and in the pre-op setting and post-op setting. I was a medical professional for over 47 years and worked in emergency trauma services. And I trained at the University of Southern California, LA County, and graduated there as a surgical nursing technician. And I became one of the first surgical board certified surgical assistants in California. So I've seen it all. When it comes to the deluge of what happens to Native American people, as long as we're ignored, there's no way that the problem's going to go away. Identifying these individuals, in assessing our patients, it is always evident if someone's in trouble. We're trained in this way, and that's mandated here in California. So when it comes to our spirit walk, our faith, the things that are needed to make an individual stronger to be able to speak out and self-identify, I think the medical profession, the HMOs have to begin to understand this. In Nava, what we do is that we take our veterans, we bring them home, and in talking circles, start to heal them with ceremony. We bring medicine to them. You'll see that today I wear my medicine out. This practice is not common among the Apache people. We always have it hidden, but today I have it out, and you'll see an eagle plume on it. We give this to all our members so that they'll always have their medicine with them, because what it contains is something to help them in their prayer. It contains personal items, things that are pleasant to the creator and fragrance. You'll see on mine, I have an eagle plume. And the teaching of the Apache is the men have a blue bead and the women a white bead. And if I live in a good way and I live in a healthy way, my spirit will pass through that blue bead before I go to see my ancestors. I am the son of a missing person. I am the grandson of a missing person. 100 years ago, my grandmother walked out of the reservation in Isleta, New Mexico. She gathered up her children after she was told her man was dead. It took her 2 years to come to California. She did. She did it all on her own with her 5 children, all who became fighting men and veterans during World War II. And her grandchildren became fighting men during Vietnam. We lost one of our brothers during Vietnam, my brother Ralph, killed in action. So you see the importance of what we bring to the table, to this country, who we are. I'm sorry to say that still, as a spirit advisor and someone who goes to bases here in California, Native Americans are still not allowed to practice their faith, but instead are escorted frequently to other denominations for services. One day, and I hope soon,
Thank you, Roy.
This will be a change. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I hear you saying is modeling traditional behavior and recognizing and accepting traditional treatments is what service providers need to keep in mind.
They need this education, yes.
Thank you so much for that, Roy. So Jessica, back to you. How can we promote resiliency and prevention while bringing awareness to mitigating abduction or murder of Indigenous people?
Well, just know that Indigenous people are survivors, and we're resilient people. And we come from a population that has survived genocide, boarding schools, and systematic oppression. Here at the Yurok Tribal Court, we are assisting people in trying to fix this intergenerational trauma, but sometimes it's a long process, but any assistance, even something that may seem minor, to a big for maybe the cat that lasting repairs to our Indian people and Indian country.
And Ted or Roy, did you want to add to that at all?
Yes, I wanted to say that I believe the education should begin in schools.
Mhm.
And I think introducing this knowledge of what is going on in our community in terms of abuse and identifying abusers is necessary, no matter how painful. Sometimes you have to look in the mirror. And children need to know this so they can protect themselves. Abusers, traffickers, they are very controlling, manipulative people. And we in the health profession have been trained to recognize these things. When these issues do occur, we were able to report these issues to social services, child protective services, law enforcement, because there are identifiers. And I think this is the education that people need. And I remember 20 years back, getting this training and this continuing education that was mandated so as we could also recognize these children who are being abused. I want to fast forward now back to how it affects veterans, as many of these people escaped to the military. And I know personally in experience that they were individuals I knew personally that used false identification and served the country. That had no intention of going back. Therefore, recruiters and the DoD need education to ask the right questions when they're recruiting individuals, particularly if they're Indigenous. They need to ask the right questions. Number one, are you a tribal affiliated? Are you a Native American? Is this your correct address? Can you prove with a family member that also has a residency with you? I know individuals who use addresses from post office and join the military, or false addresses from businesses and join the military, and they technically were missing. So this education is needed across the board. And no matter how painful it might be, we need to start with our children. We have to let them know they themselves might be victimized now. And abusers were victims themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Sochi. That was all I had. I appreciate it. Thank you all.
You and Jessica and Roy for your answers to today's questions. Friends, we hope that this webinar has brought resourceful and important information to you, to your families and your community. For us here at Calvet, it helps us with their competency training to better serve our Native veteran community. And so for any veterans out there and families, we're here to serve you. Please reach out to us. For this webinar itself, we are going to provide all registrants a brochure via email with all of the links that were provided here today. And additionally, once this webinar recording is ready, we will let you know as well, so that you know it's out there for viewing. Okay, and so we'll move into just a contact slide here, Ricky. If you want to reach out to Calvet or need information on specific veterans benefits, you saw Ms. Wimmer's information on the slide as well. Our Minority Veterans Division information is available for you to contact us. And like I said, anything that you didn't capture, we'll make sure to follow up with that email. All right, and so we're now going to close today's program with the prayer. And we're going to go ahead and bring on Roy back into the spotlight. Thank you very much.
I'd like to sing a song to you that was taught to me by a fellow Marine as we would gather secretly to sing songs, have ceremony. And it was there that I learned many songs from many tribes. So I'd like to offer this song to you and to all the people that were in observance of this webinar, for all those that were individuals who saw themselves or maybe heard words that stirred their souls, that brought bad remembrances back to them. So I'd like to offer it to you song. This was a Choctaw song that was taught to me, and I'd like to offer it to you. Sheho Wachaka Sheshna Kotiba Ana puba shahati mati hali. Sheho wachakta sheshna kotiba. Ana puba shahati mati hali. Akano mi bomaka okle gochaya tamaleho. Di mati hali.
Thank you, Roy. We look forward to the next opportunity. To all of our partners, we appreciate you. And on behalf of Calvet Secretary Dr. Mbasiani, we look forward to next time. Thank you for joining us.